Webster's backed away from the police barrier and he reacts to the officer coming towards him. Webster waves the officer to stay away. Webster believes the officer is after him. The officer crossing the gate rail and grabbing the pole away from Webster. This officer initiated the physical contact. So Webster said he feels the crowd moving forward and feels pressure from a red-hatted man behind him. Tom testified that he felt the need to defend himself. The officer rams the flagpole twice into the side of Webster's face and mouth. You could see the pole in Tom's face. Webster says he pushed up the officer's gas mask, but he did not strike him. The officer provokes, taunts, pushes, and strikes Webster in the face. So the officer testified that he did not make any hand gestures. The officer testified he didn't punch Webster, and he said that his hand slipped. This police officer didn't even file a police report, and that he doesn't even remember the situation. The judge called it a touch, but when it came to the police officer punching him in the face, it was just a touch. Thomas Webster is your typical American hero, decorated Marine, 20-year police officer in New York City, unblemished record, and he's going to jail for 10 years for assaulting a police officer on January 6th. These are, people that are here to stand up for the Constitution, for voter integrity. The type of guy who, law enforcement, military, that have a certain type, masculine, that have a certain type of mentality, that aren't afraid to stand up to the government.
And good afternoon. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and our StreamYard is being somewhat difficult today. Sorry about that, everybody. Welcome to Steel News. It is Tuesday, December 10th, and we are getting closer and closer to Liberation Day from this regime. Thank you, God, for all your grace and glory to deliver us from evil on this past November. Thank God. That's all I can say. And there are a lot of people who are going to breathe a heavy sigh of relief. And I'm talking thousands and thousands of people that are connected to the J6 families, including the J6ers themselves, that have been languishing in fear and in prison since this whole ordeal started, when they clearly stole, I'll say it again out loud, they stole this election. They stole our country in a coup d'etat, a Fedsurrection. And it is all coming out in the wash. I mean, there's just every day more and more information coming out. We've got a great show today. We've got a couple of incredible J6ers that are going to be folks that are in the J6 community. Some have been a J6er themselves. Others are just very closely connected and have done a massive amount of work in order to liberate the people. That story you just saw me play, thank you to Kara Castronova with the Gateway Pundit. She put that together. It was about Thomas Webster. He's a decorated U.S. Marine veteran, 20-year New York Police Department officer, husband, father of three. He turned himself in, actually, to the authorities on October of 2022 to serve the longest sentence that a judge has handed to a J6 defendant to date at that time. And it's 10 years. 10 years. The Justice Department's handling of J6 cases has been absolutely criticized by all of us who understand just how abominable this whole thing is. You can't get a fair shake in a DC courtroom. Their heavy-handed tactics, perceived political bias, disregard for your, mine, everybody's civil liberties. You don't even have to be a J6er to see how much they're disregarding your civil liberties around the country. And as over today, over 1,500 individuals have been arrested, including many nonviolent offenders, raising concerns about the proportionality and fairness of the department's actions. Many of those arrested for January 6th related charges face accusations of nonviolent offenses such as trespassing, unlawful entry, or disorderly conduct. Despite the absence of violence in their alleged actions, the Justice Department has deployed heavily armed SWAT teams to conduct arrests. Yeah, you know those no-knock warrants, flashbangs, guns pointed at your dogs, your wife, your kids. Unbelievable. This, of course, these are measures typically reserved for high-risk individuals. We saw what was going on that day. Did you think these were high-risk individuals? These aggressive operations have disrupted families, communities, leading critics to accuse the DOJ of massive overreach and prioritize political messaging over the principles of justice. Trentus Evans, well, he's a January 6th expert. He actually pled guilty to one misdemeanor charge of entering a restricted building, and was forced to serve out his sentence in jail while he was held in solitary confinement for a few days at a time. The cell where he was housed is where they put prisoners to punish them. All for what? For walking around the Capitol for 10 minutes? Seriously? I mean, jaywalking? You're going to get thrown in jail for jaywalking too? He didn't touch anything. Most of the people didn't touch anything. The videos prove all that. A lot of these people stayed inside those little stanchions. He's also an author. He's a filmmaker, founder of Condemned USA Legal Advocacy, public speaker, lobbyist, journalist. He's also got a new book out. Call It Insurrection, Comrade. Here to talk to me about all that and more is Trentus Evans. Trentus, great to have you. And I'm so glad to stand shoulder to shoulder with a J6er because we're all J6ers now.
Wow. Thank you, Ann. That's a brilliant introduction. What a great opening to this show. Nobody does it like you do. I truly appreciate you for really bringing light to the injustice that's occurred for so many people. Like I've said for many years, I was charged with the 1512 obstruction of Congress. I was blown away at what I was seeing. I mean, when they raided my house, the flashbang, they came in, I didn't get the flashbangs. I didn't get that. But the flashing images through my mind always remain where my 13-year-old son was at gunpoint on my front porch for doing nothing more than trying to go to school. A 13-year-old child, you see that, and it will change you. When they put a child, you do it to me, you come after me, you do that, but leave the kids out of it. You leave the children alone, and they didn't. They did this to the American family. They did this to the nuclear family, nucleus of, kind of the heartbeat of America. And here we are, people like Thomas Caldwell, his wife, Michelle, are suffering. Their children are suffering. They've done this. They've brought this to the conversation because they wanted to show you in that jackbooted thuggery that they could shut you down, stomp you out, stamp out your voice with the lies that they've told and controlling the narrative. And here we are today, and 4 years later, we're approaching 4 years. We're less than 30 days away from 4 years later that they are still lying. They are still giving false representation. They have changed timestamps. They have shuttered and hidden evidence. They've given false testimony. There was perjury on the stand. No one's been held accountable for that. No one's even been charged for everything that's going against the truth.
Well, I got some good news. Sorry about that. I've got some good news just breaking right now on Kyle Becker's X feed. Look at this. Fulton County Superior Court has issued a default judgment against District Attorney Fani Willis for refusing to turn over records that could document her collusion with the J6 committee and special counsel Jack Smith. The court order states by finding the defendant in default, the court has effectively declared that she violated the Open Records Act. The court further orders the defendant to conduct a thorough search of her records for responsive materials within 5 days of this order's entry. Within the same 5-day period, the defendant is ordered to provide the plaintiff with copies of all responsive records that are not legally exempt or exempted from disclosure. So she's saying that the records don't exist, which could potentially put her at a legal risk of perjury, which is why the court says it makes it clear that this has substantive reason to believe Willis is withholding records. So she's in some doo-doo, and she's maybe one of the first people that's going to be maybe singled out here. What say you?
Oh, I'm sure she'll get a pardon from the Biden administration. And while we're talking about that, while we're talking about Joe Biden and his pardons, if I may, Ann, just to add something.
Please.
There is not one individual, nobody on January 6th that did anything that rose to the depravity of the actions of Hunter Biden that have been going on for more than a decade at the very least, that there's video evidence of, countless witnesses, proof positive that these acts occurred, that this individual, Hunter Biden, did some of the most despicable undermining of the United States that may have ever been done, in individual depravity to individuals, including what appear to be children from those laptop images and videos that we've all seen now, which of course, remember, was all Russian collusion and Russian disinformation and nonsense that we were supposed to believe. Not one individual January 6th did anything that rose to that level of depravity. And yet Joe Biden pardons that man and claims that it's weaponization of justice. And the only reason anyone went after him with video evidence that Hunter Biden and the Democrats and the mainstream media have tried to shutter from your eyes for years. And it finally came out only after the election. And don't forget this part. They've tried to hide their information, and the January 6th defendants still to this day, when have you ever seen that the criminals are demanding more evidence of their crime? We, the people, the January 6th defendants, those that have been through this process, demand that you release all the video from the Capitol footage, release the CCTV footage, show the American people what really happened. Never in history have criminals demanded more evidence of their crime. And that's where I'll leave that one in, because you and I both know, you've seen enough. I'm working with Peter and many other great people that we both know that we have been marginalized. We've been trampled. The select committee is a lie.
This is the cops. The building's yours.
They harmed the American people in a way that has never been done. This rose to a new level.
It did rise to a new level. It's a new level of depravity that this country, I don't know, in the 250 years of our history, have we ever seen, where we've seen just our complete government collapse in on itself with the weight of its own lies and, its own decision to basically overthrow the standing republic. This is what I find so egregious, is they've decided to overthrow the standing republic by making sure that they stole the election from the one man that the people actually voted for. And then when we actually showed up to talk about it or to do something about it, they said, no, you know what? You're not going to be here to talk about it. You're not going to be here to do anything about it. Instead, we're going to call ourselves comrade, because that's the direction that they've gone. They've gone so hard left with everything. I can't say they've come right back around to the other side to meet the right side, but they are so hard left that they're running their own corporation. They're running their own government, per se. It's a legislative democracy. And they have literally overlaid all of it with rules, codes, and statutes under the U.S. Code, which has basically dissolved our republic's constitution, or should we say not dissolved it, but set it aside. It's still there, and we can pick it up and we can run with it. But we just have to know that we can pick it up and run with it. And that's what we tried to do on January 6th. We tried to say, hey, we have a First Amendment right to be here. We are petitioning you to hear our grievances. Please don't, count all these electoral college votes, because the electors need to examine the evidence of the fraud that has gone on in all 50 states. And we were denied that. As a J6er, Trennis, you have gotten basically a law degree. You might as well be a lawyer, but I wouldn't want to insult you and call you one. Can you sort of project into the future what this is going to look like for those that were guilty in all counts of basically setting up this Fedsurrection and then not allowing the people to have their grievances heard? What is that going to look like for them in the future once President Trump steps into office?
Well, Title 18, Section 242 clearly states that any individual up into a federal judge that knowingly violates or undermines the constitutional rights of an individual. Yeah, thank you. Yes. That individual can be held in prison up until life in prison and or the death penalty for those actions. And that includes federal judges. Don't forget, that is everyone. So no, that is a crime under United States Code. They wrote it. They want to uphold it. And I remind the judges that continued this nonsensical idea that you're a danger to democracy if you don't subscribe to the ideology that the election was legitimate, that they want to lay out. And we, the people, have clearly seen it. They want to say, well, 60 cases were adjudicated and Trump never won any of them. I don't care about that. I care about truth and justice. We've seen the same corruption of these courts. We've seen the willful actions of judges in D.C. and their continued effort to subvert the law, judicial norms, and look at things through a different lens for one group. And I just had this debate with somebody from PBS the other day, interestingly, after doing an interview. And I think you'll appreciate this. So they wanted to say, well, these people did this. I'm like, okay, great. So if these people did this and you want to be a purist and you want to say crime has to be held in equity, right? That we have to look at criminality equitably. If this group did it, then you have to hold this group accountable. So it's one or the other. Everybody gets this charge or nobody gets a charge. And that's the way it works. But we've seen at all of this, the American people have been bludgeoned time and again. This is nothing new that we've not seen before. This was the lowest learner in the Tea Party and the whole effort there, that the IRS and the scandal. But this is on steroids. They took this to a new level. They were opportunistic, if not creators of the event, to put us in this position and silence conservative voices in an effort to go after Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's 100% what they did do, and I believe that they would continue doing this if we allowed them to, Trentis. And so I'm really hopeful that President Trump is going to take the necessary steps to, one, pardon everybody on day one. We have another guest coming on here shortly, Suzanne Monk, who's with the J6 Pardon Project. I know you all are friends. I know all these J6 groups, most have gotten together and collaborated. In the beginning, everybody was trying to do the right thing. And but turf wars set aside, have really people have come together because we realize if we don't come together and stand together, we're all going to hang separately. So, I think the strength in numbers has finally proven out. And those that are really doing the good works like yourselves, you have an incredible website, condemnedusa.com. I encourage people to go to your website because you actually have a lot of information there, as does Suzanne's website that we're going to show here shortly. But in terms of the aftermath, let's say Trump pardons everybody. There are some people that did break windows and did do things that they should have, something they should be held to account for stuff like that. Trespassing, so what? It's 40 years later. You can't stay in jail for 4 years for trespassing. And for the amount of lies that we've been spewed to, for those that didn't get arrested yet or flashbanged or hauled into unconstitutionally, I think time served for the stress of everything that's gone on in this country we've had to witness is also time served enough there. What happens to those? How does President Trump deal with those that we now know were probably part of this FBI team to lure people into the trap of going into the Capitol on a misdemeanor, essentially?
Yeah. So, and I think it's this place where we have to be. I don't want to see that nothing happens here, that we just move on, turn the page idea, because the page has been torn out of the book. It's laying here. It must be reviewed and reviewed thoroughly. Pardon the actions, move on from this. And if there's people that actually tried to set up January 6th defendants to be harmed, killed, lives ruined, that was actually part of a broader, go after the low level ones, because the bigger ones, the bigger fish they'll start saying to save themselves. And, I don't think that anyone got a fair trial in January 6th. I don't think anyone that went to trial had a fair outcome. You couldn't have a jury or a bench go to trial and have a reasonable outcome there, because it's just not America anymore. Those people live in an echo chamber. We have seen the depravity of the individuals that hold those benches, and they are nothing more than, in many cases, I think the vast majority of those judges are nothing more than puppets. And somebody's got their hand under the robe tickling and making it work, and they're just moving a mouthpiece. And it's really sad, because these people created a new jurisprudence for January 6th like nothing we've ever seen before.
Yeah. Well, again, they're making a new jurisprudence based on their rules. And a lot of these rules are making up as they go along. Again, this is not how the Constitution works. It's not how your Bill of Rights is supposed to be enforced. They've done, frankly, it's been completely counterintuitive from where I'm sitting. And that to me is just so dismaying. But I also think that, the past 4 years with COVID, what's happening in North Carolina right now, what happened in Hawaii, people are waking up to the fact, for those that believe the government is here to help them, are waking up that the government is doing nothing. And the North Carolinas, there's a lot of, Asheville, Charlotte, very blue cities, but they're waking up to, wow, I guess the government isn't going to help us out. The statist mentality, while it might be innocent in its origins, is basically an errored way to look at the way you're supposed to govern yourself, right? Don't depend on the government. They're supposed to just do what you tell them to do. You just can't depend on them to just produce things out of thin air, although ours does all the time and sends billions of it to Africa and Ukraine and Israel and God knows where. It's amazing. They won't give us their help at all.
I've never sat down across the table or picked up the phone and talked to another American citizen that's like, yeah, I want to keep sending all my money over here. I don't know anyone. I haven't met anyone. Anyone that supports this. I heard that, recently Elon Musk and Vivek were meeting with members of Congress, and they sat down with them and they were talking to him about slashing $2 trillion. And they said, well, we'd be lucky to get 500 billion. And members of Congress stood up and said, we got a problem. It's us, these people in this room, a particular member. I am just shocked. Did you not learn something from what we the people just stood behind? We the people just said, we want Donald Trump. We're tired of the same old rigmarole. We're tired of this game.
Right.
And even though they supposedly was a convicted felon with their, not mantra of this, and the people like Fannie Willis and the Alvin Braggs and the people that have done this, and the Cruz and the Eric Olsons and the Nicholas Suss and all of these people, Norman Jean Anderson, et cetera, that we fought, we've battled in these courtrooms, and we've won. We've been victorious, and we would have been victorious on appeal on this New York case. But here's the reality and where we sit today. The American people stood up and said, no more. We watched what you did to this man. He's representative of our voice. He's not our representative in the sense that he's our leader. He represents our voice. Donald Trump speaks like we do. He thinks like the heartbeat of America. And America came out and delivered. And they can't escape it saying, oh, the Electoral College caused this, because he won the popular vote too. Don't forget that, America. Remember that we won the popular vote here, that the American public came out, stood up and said, we've had enough. We don't want to go this path. We don't want to go this route. This is what we want. So members of Congress, members of the Senate, all of you, the House, need to recognize where we stand today as a people and a public. And if we have to vote you out one way or the other, you're coming out of there. We're done with you. We don't want you there. We are not having this anymore. You do not represent the interest of the American public. You don't represent me. You don't represent Ann and the people that sound like us. And you sure as hell don't represent the interests that we hold for our children and future generations. So enough's enough. Get on board or we will get you out. We have had enough.
Yeah. Well, I think your book says it best. Call it insurrection, comrade, because in fact, it was the comrades of the Fedsurrection, of the FBI, that was deeply involved. You have this great brand new book out. You've got a wonderful book jacket endorsement from General Michael Flynn on the back, which is fantastic. You know, I call him the world's general. And he has spent the last 4 years, I believe, zigzagging the country, holding America together and keeping the fight in her to stand up, recognize the aggrieved, that we are the aggrieved party that doesn't get our grievances redressed anywhere over anything at any time, and helped get people motivated to get to the polls and make it too big to rig. And that's the reason President Trump is sitting in there. I know he told me he stands shoulder to shoulder with him and says he doesn't want anything from President Trump. And I think, why would you ever want to go back to that septic swamp anyway? I mean, look how they treated him. Judge Sullivan, I don't even know why the guy's a bench left anymore, because the case was dismissed by the DOJ and he still kept going after General Flynn. It was unconscionable. Sidney Powell, another hero in all of this. So tell us a little bit about what people can expect in your book and where they can find it.
So I'm going to give you some of the revelations here that occur in this book. I captured a federal human trafficking fugitive that escaped from prison. That's clearly defined in the court record. After capturing the fugitive, after working with the U.S. Marshals, bringing this person to justice, this wasn't my friend that I turned on. This was somebody that I believe to be a very dangerous person. And you don't do that kind of work. And as you know, you've worked on these topics. You don't do that kind of work independently. You don't just decide you're going to start trafficking humans into the United States. You have to work with somebody to do that, in my experience. I captured that person. The DOJ covered it up. They finally later admitted that they covered it up, that they did have the information. They made some half-wit excuse. Oh, yeah, we've had this in our possession the entire time. They admitted to the judge and then have the nerve to call me a vigilante. Instead of recognizing what I would say is bravery and heroism to work against that kind of thing, human trafficking, this person escaped from prison. This wasn't a wanted for questioning. They were convicted, guilty, in prison, and escaped from prison, and I captured them, and they lied. Not only that, but the FBI came to me March of 2023 and tried to get me to work for them. I don't know what they wanted me to do. I never got that far in the conversation, but Condemned USA was very effective, serving the interest of January 6 defendants. And I rather suspect that some of those people out there that continually try to undermine the efforts that we have and that we work on, that we've given so much to January 6 and the defendants, and it's indisputable the amount of work we've done, my personal expenses I've poured in, and then you have these individuals that work to tear me down, tear others down that have been effective in the fight. I don't ever, in history, have I ever said a negative word about a single January 6 defendant. I've sued one attorney, and for something that they did that was, and well, we solved that problem, and it was my end of that. But most importantly, I want people to understand that the DOJ also attempted to set me up. I don't know if it was the FBI, DHS. They don't tell you who the person was at the end of the day,
right?
But they tried to entrap me in yet another scheme, and they got exposed in that. So these people have been exposed time and time and time again for their actions. And yet here I sit, and I've filed this under sworn statement, and I'm on federal probation as we sit here today, some 3 years later. from January 6th. I'm still on federal probation for a misdemeanor, 4-point misdemeanor. And if I show up at your house and break into your car and steal your car stereo, that is more trouble than the 4-point misdemeanor, but I'm still on federal probation because I would not say, I said the election was stolen. I stood up for the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys, and I stood up against the perjurers that were testifying right down the hall that day and spoke it into the record. I stood up against the Select Committee and called them cowards for not having me testify. The Select Committee, while many people were attempting to avoid testifying with the Select Committee, I was petitioning. I was demanding to testify because I had information and I had people. And now that Clay Higgins, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Representative Brasheen, and many others that have stepped forward, Representative Burleson, and listened to this issue and now are aware, I expect action, not for me, for my justice, but for the truth of January 6th, for the actual truth to actually be a part of the conversation with the American public, because they deserve it. And not because it needs to vindicate so many people or me individually, because there was a lie. It was a narrative lie, Ann, and they controlled this narrative, and they have ruined Americans' lives, destroyed children, families, everything that hardworking Americans had put together over the course of a lifetime. And now it was all ripped away from them so unceremoniously by people that care nothing about justice. They had a political interest in a partisan effort to take on conservatives. And they've proven that they won, and they did win right now. But we're going to have a rematch coming around in 2024, starting in 2025, I pray. And that Trump does not allow these people to wiggle off the hook, because I ask you this, President Trump, if you allow these people to do this and there's no penalty, if nothing is done, this is my plea to President Trump. If you don't cause justice to occur, we have little faith in the system as it is now. We believe that there's good people that can come back together in this system and hopefully resolve what has become this America today that is inconsistent with the constitutional path that we're on. And I ask of President Trump, do not let this go. Be a dog with a bone. Take this on. Bring us justice. Expose who did what. And people must have justice. So for there to be justice, you can't get to walk free just because you're a political official or the son of someone, or you had ties with members of Congress, or your constitutional or your congressional immunity. There are ways and there are methods, and it must be done. Even if the convictions don't stand, you can't get anywhere. It must be exposed for the record, because this is history and they rewrote it, and we have to have the truth, and future generations deserve it.
You're right. You're absolutely right, Trennis. And this is why I'm going to encourage everybody to get your story here. Call it Insurrection Comrade. You're so articulate, well-spoken. You have lived it yourself personally. You've stood by hundreds of people who are going through similar circumstances. And there, believe me, are thousands of people who have yet to have their doors kicked in. And I'm sure that the little Fedsurrectionists and the FBI-liars out there would love to kick everybody's door in that was at the Capitol that day, just because that's what they want to do, strike fear in the heart of Americans to subdue us all under their will. And the American will is a lot stronger than they gave us credit for. We showed it on November 5th, and we're going to continue to show it at the inauguration. And there is a press conference coming up at the Capitol Westin Hotel Ballroom on January 6th. I will be there. And there will be others that'll be speaking there. And we're going to continue to show our support for the Americans' constitutional First Amendment right to redress your grievances with Congress. And we're going to show that this heavy-handed two-tier system of justice is going to end with the Trump administration. Where can folks pick up your book?
So it is available at Barnes & Noble. It's available on Amazon, Apple Books, Kindle. I mean, it's everywhere. The book is actually, and you're going to not believe this, it was the #1 bestseller in new releases on Amazon. I about fell over. I couldn't believe it this month out. And it was selling right there with Ketanji Brown Jackson's book. I about died. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And somebody called me. They're like, you're #1 bestseller on Amazon this month. It's crazy. New releases, by category. And I went, what? That's awesome. So crazy. So I want to thank especially General Flynn. General Flynn, thank you. I haven't had a chance to do this publicly. I've done this personally, but General Flynn, publicly, I state to you, thank you for backing the truth so that American people could hear it. It's the first book out by a January 6th defendant, and it tells the truth of what happened to me and many of the other stories. And Laura Logan, thank you for writing such a beautiful foreword to the American people that they could understand the reality that's in this book that, you know, as an investigative journalist that reviewed all of this throughout time. So
Yeah.
thank you
God
to you
bless.
two fine individuals. And thank you, Ann, today for having me.
Oh, Trent, as always, it's a pleasure to see you. And I look forward to seeing you probably in the not too distant future.
Very soon.
All right. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Ann.
Thank you. Just a great guy. Stand up, stand up, stand up. I love that man. And I remember meeting him at an event years ago, and I thought, this guy's totally together. He's a January 6th defendant. What exactly is going on here? And that's he was one of the first people to really pique my interest into really taking a deeper dive into everything that was going on, because as always, the news has been a fire hose. We've got on deck Suzanne Monk right after this quick commercial break, so don't go anywhere. You're going to hear more about the J6 Pardon Project, which President Trump apparently is taking a very close look at, because he's getting on the bandwagon and pardoning the J6ers day one. We're going to hear more about all of that from Suzanne Monk right after this message from our commercial sponsors.
My Towels solved a problem that we've all had with towels. You go into the stores and they feel lotiony and soft, but then you get them home and they wind dry you. That's why I made My Towels. They actually work, they're soft, and they absorb. And now I'm excited to announce 2 brand new lines of My Towels. What makes them the best towels ever is they're now made with 100% long staple Shapir cotton. This is a combed ring spun cotton that makes My Towels even softer and more absorbent than ever. And now you get a 6-piece set for an amazing introductory sale price as low as $29.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get My Towels for only $29.98. Or you can get my designer premium line for just $20 more. Either way, you save 50% now on all My Towels. They actually work. What a concept. This offer won't last long, so please order now.
MyPillow.com.
This election is filled with promises of tax cuts that will go nowhere. But don't let this excess noise blind you to what's really at stake: your retirement. As economic volatility continues to grow, few are talking about the consequence that could ripple through your retirement savings. Many wealthy investors have started preparing for the shockwave ahead. Have you? If you have $50,000 or more saved for retirement, click the link below or call 1-888-782-9064 and secure your free guide to gold IRAs from Augusta Precious Metals. Again, click the link below or call 1-888-782-9064. Suzanne Monk is a massive Trump supporter and the force behind the J6pardonproject.com. She's come to live and breathe our Constitution, specifically Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, which says, as I read, the president shall be commander-in-chief of the Army and the Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states. He may require the opinion in writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject related to the duties or their respected offices. And he shall have the power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. Joining me now to talk about the J6 Pardon Project and what President Trump's going to do on day one is the founder of J6 Pardon Project, Suzanne Monk. Suzanne, great to have you on the show. Glad you could sit through a little Trent Sevens.
Yeah, it was always great to see Trent, as he has been such a workhorse, such a huge force in the J6 community. In fact, he's one of the people I mention in the J6 Pardon Project Strategy Guide as a suggestion to the president on who to take on with regards to an advisory role with these pardons. And, we're all working very hard to, use all of those channels, use all of those connections we've built over many years to certainly influence the president. We keep seeing him come closer and closer to our lingo, and he seems to be, really starting to parrot what we've been talking about for, a year now.
Yeah. So let's talk about the J6 Pardon Project. You, by the way, people need to understand what you've created. Now, you've given me the privilege of seeing the list of all the J6 defendants. That list is so comprehensive. And I'm not just talking about the names on it, but I'm talking about every single aspect of the J6ers' life, depending on whether or not, once they were arrested and charged, what they were charged with, all the U.S. codes, whether they served, whether they pled, how long their time served was, are they still in probation? I mean, you've got, I don't know how many columns it goes across. It looks like 30 or 40 columns of items that you track for every single J6 defendant. I've never seen a spreadsheet like this made in a labor of love from somebody who's not paid to do it, but you took this on. Why did you take something like this on?
Well, I started the January 6th, the J6 Pardon Project back in January of 2024. And I did that because I got a lot of friends on the other side of the bars, and unfortunately for January 6th. And I know that this is a huge body of work. When we say we need justice, we need pardons for the January 6ers, what we're saying is a pardoning effort, perhaps as large as this country has seen since the Civil War. I mean, it is an epically huge pardoning effort that we're trying to accomplish in a very short period of time, not necessarily over time like we had a chance to reform after the Civil War, but immediately. We need these people home today. We need their lives rectified today. It's been 4 years of literal torture at the hands of the government. And so this is what the founders intended. When the justice system of the government is excessive, is unmerciful, then the president is, of course, he has a duty. I don't even think it's an ability. He has a duty to be the check and balance on a broken justice system. And this is exactly what we've been working towards. So, that's a huge body of work. And I knew that they were going to need all of the information on all of those individuals. When you say we need to pardon the J6ers, you first need to know, well, who are the J6ers? Secondarily, you need to know what are we pardoning them from? What are the convictions they have we're pardoning them from? And of course, you need to know where to send the pardon, right? You need to know if they're still in jail. You need to know if they're home with their families on probation, on supervised release, what status they're at. And we have included informations like the attorney, the U.S. attorney, the judge, so we can actually use this tool. And we're getting this into the hands of members of Congress, like Congress members like Andy Biggs and Corey Mills, so that they can use the tool to really analyze the lawfare that went on and the misuse of these codes of 18 USC 1752, 1512. And we saw even the Supreme Court has validated that was misused. So, this tool will be informational, going on and on forward into decades, I'm assuming. But what it was designed for is to be able to quickly, I guess the word review is a dangerous word, but look at all the cases so that you can appropriately apply that pardon to them. And that's what we made a tool to make sure that that can happen in a very short period of time.
So you said, President Trump is starting to use the language. I have up on here your J6 Pardon Project strategy guide on the screen. A special thanks to Tamara Lee. Know and love her. And yes, she was a very good friend of Pasquale Scopoliti. God rest his soul. He was another incredible human who worked on the Pardon Flynn Now mission, she's been critical to your J6.
Well, let me say, we really built the Pardon of Innocence, the J6 Pardon of Innocence that we talk about here in the strategy guide. We built it on that work, on Pasquale's work on the Pardon Flynn Now project. I brought Tamara in intimately into that portion of the research so that we could really take what had been done at a federal level and move that on to the next step. And one of the ways that we are suggesting the president advances that, if you will, is to add to that pardon of innocence something that is very common at the state level in pardons of innocence, which is an expungement of the criminal record. That's something that's never happened at the federal level. There has never been a federal pardon that has expunged the criminal record, but the president clearly has the authority to do it. All constitutional scholars agree that it doesn't happen automatically, but that means, of course, if he stipulates it, it can. And we've actually suggested in the strategy guide you're looking at, in the pardon language itself, for him to use that specification to expunge the federal record. And we go even one step further, begin wrongful imprisonment payments from the DOJ. The president does control certain purse strings. We always say Congress holds the purse strings, but look, the president has a few coins in his pocket. He controls, obviously, the Veterans Administration. He can control that through executive order, and the DOJ as well. So President Trump could, in fact, in the pardon he issues, in that pardon of innocence issue, stipulate that the DOJ begins wrongful imprisonment payments, which their standard rate is $50,000 a year for every year. So it's a drop in the bucket, obviously, to what these January 6ers need, but it's a start. And it's a way we begin that process to really get rectification and restitution back. And we need to keep pushing on that, because I know the federal government is going to want to issue pardons, and they are going to want to move past.
Yeah,
And they
of
are
course
going
they
to
are.
want to stipulate with those pardons that you can't sue the government for, there's going to be ways in which we need to be aware. And that's one of the reasons that when in the pardons project, in the strategy guide, we suggest the president use what is called a proclamation style pardon, just like Jimmy Carter did with the draft dodgers from 1972. It is a pardon that you can file for, submit for, when you are ready. You meet certain criteria. For example, you were a draft dodger, right?
Right.
You meet certain criteria. Then when you are ready, even now, you can go to the U.S. Pardon Attorney's website and apply for that draft dodger pardon. So it would be available in perpetuity, allow people to complete appeals. And we see the justice that actually is potentially coming with appeals, with the evidence continuing to come out, more and more information revealing what in fact the government did that day, the police brutality that day, etc. So there is in fact a real exoneration potential in the courts, and we don't want these pardons to stop that justice process. And so we've advised the president to use that proclamation style, and that way people can apply for it when they've exhausted their appeals process. And I think we're going to see a lot of justice if he, in fact, facilitates that availability of pardons in perpetuity, of these J6 pardons in perpetuity. We'll be able to really fight out some of this truth in the courts, and I think see real long-term justice. So, there's techniques like that we're very critical on, and boy, am I up Pam Bondi's backside and about making sure that she fires Elizabeth Oyer, the current U.S. pardon attorney, and replaces her with somebody who was not appointed by Merrick Garland, clearly to thwart the president's process.
So along those lines, since you brought up Merrick Garland, anyway, that man has been responsible, along with his federal district judges. We've done the team over at Vax Choice, myself and others, but led by Lisa McGee, have done all the, the digging on the oaths, right? These people don't have proper oaths on file. Another gentleman out there, Frank, has also done some massive oath digging. They literally don't have proper oaths on file. So we are essentially giving them, through our tacit agreement, authority to rule over us right now. And, Judge Boasberg and U.S. Attorney Matthew Graves have been some of the most egregious and most sanctimonious and just really horrific to the J6ers when you look at all of them, right? And you put all the judges up on a lineup and go, who is really the most, punitive? There's got to be some kind of punishment for these people that have been posing and acting as our public servants in these, official positions when they're really superficial officials. I mean, they're not really officials. They're not legitimately there. Is there going to be some action that we, the people, can take to basically flip the tables here and put these people behind bars, or financial punishment? What?
Well, I was excited to see Trump's pick of Harmeet Dillon for the assistant attorney general dealing with civil rights. And I think that this is actually where we need to start, because these are the violations that have actually occurred, and they're very egregious, and they can hold up to life imprisonment. And that's what happened to these individuals on January 6th and ongoing. That attack, that civil rights attack, has continued on these individuals, and more people conspired to that crime. The U.S. attorneys, the prosecutors, the judges, members of Congress, the select committee, members of the media. There's a whole real collusion to continue that violation of Americans' civil rights, of their rights to the 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendment, fair trial, speedy trial, the right to address your accusers, to face your accusers, all of those things, as well as actual fraud against these individuals, lies, misinformation, intentional misinformation. And in the case of the deaths that day, Ashley Babbitt's death, Roseanne Boylan's death, individuals who worked together to create the events that led to those deaths participated in 18 USC 1111, murder or attempted murder. And you don't have to have succeeded to kill anybody or participated in the killing to have that charge. So, there are real crimes that occurred that day that have real charges and real consequences. And we certainly see, as Trinus mentioned, some of those charges are just as possible for judges as well, judges and officers. To be fair, there are several officers, as we've seen with the George Floyd situation, as we've seen many times, officers that break the law, officers that commit violent crimes, and in fact be held accountable. And they should.
They're requesting additional resources on the east side as they
there's been plenty of evidence for officers, and we showed that at the beginning of the show, where officers, basically instigated the violence against the people who were just there protesting. And you're allowed to protest. There's nothing wrong with protesting. And particularly for those people who didn't even know they were on Capitol grounds that was restricted, because by the time I got to the Capitol, I can tell you, there was no barricades. You had no knowledge of what's restricted, what's not. There was nothing. There was nothing.
And I've seen 1,569, 70 cases. I've looked at the charges. I know exactly. I personally have read all of the charges for that many defendants.
Right.
No one was charged with pulling that fence away. That first vinyl fence that was removed, I have not seen the person charged with that crime. So, and everyone asked about the after that. Everyone obviously nobody knew that it was blocked. So, this is the situation. We don't see, I find it interesting you find the news, because that's another interesting thing. We don't see anybody charged with rioting, 2101, or inciting to riot, even though we are called rioters over and over and over.
Right.
We don't see anyone charged with insurrection or treason. Okay.
Right.
Just seditious conspiracy, not sedition itself. These are all the very interesting ways in which the lawfare unfolded, and the real attack, as much as January 6th was a horrible day, and for those who lost their lives on that day, it was certainly a day that we should all mourn and treat with true somber attitude. But the crime that occurred against the American people that day has not stopped. Not 1 second since that day, and it has continued in these courtrooms and in these jailhouses since then, and it continues to this day. And this is why President Trump must intervene. This is why we worked so hard to really build that public support for President Trump's pardons of the January 6ers, and frankly more, the FACE Act, people like Bevel and Betty, and the praying nuns,
Bevel,
who are peacefully protesting at abortion clinics. John Woods, who was one of the first weaponized individuals, a state senator who was railroaded in yet another very similar entrapment scheme. Why? Because he supported President Trump, and he sits in jail to this day for having done far less than Rod Blagojevich did. Just saying. So we need justice. We need justice for a lot of individuals, and we need it quickly. And we need the president to go even far beyond what we see with January 6ers. And I'm hoping he will. He continues to indicate that he has not only a great understanding of the events of the day and what happened and how people have been mistreated, but you saw his comments about the Bureau of Prison System, and certainly he is aware that these facilities need great care. And I suspect that we are going to see the most reforming, when it comes to prison and justice reform, the most reforming president we have ever seen in our lifetimes.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think he's learned a lot over the last 4 years. I mean, anybody that has just been paying a little bit of attention in the last 4 years, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on or what your political leanings are, this country went to hell expediently, not in a handbasket. Literally, we were just shot out of a cannon straight to hell with this regime in power. And, nobody is feeling like they're doing better off today than they were 4 years ago. And unless, of course, you're Soros and a few other people that are, profiting off the pain and suffering of middle-class America, which is having the lifeblood of them sucked out.
No,
Thanks to
and since Joe Biden took office, about 30% of the contacts in my phone have been incarcerated. So they're coming after Trump supporters, and they have been for quite some time. And we need to de-weaponize our justice system with the partisan politics.
That's huge. Well, Suzanne, thank you so much. The work you've done, the folks, if you can support what she's doing, head on over to j6pardonproject.com, j6pardonproject.
Yeah, and let me quickly say, you can check and see if your J6er is in our defendants database, the full database, and has a copy. We've kept that private, and we're sharing it out with individuals who can utilize that. We don't want everybody's data running around on the internet, but you can check if your family member or loved one your J6er is on there. Additionally, what we really need you guys to do is continue to tweet about J6 pardons, continue to share support, continue to share those articles, write to the president, call your Congress members, ask them to publicly support J6 pardons. That public pressure is having a tremendous impact on the maximum clemency. Expanding the amount of justice these folks are getting comes from that public pressure. So please, you guys, keep that up. We're doing such a great job giving Trump that support he needs to do the full job and to really resist those who might want to politicize it and tamp him down. We need him to be bold, and your voice is helping. So,
well, we certainly appreciate everything you've done, Suzanne. You should be working with Harmeet Dillon and Trennis Evans as people that are on the lay side of things, somebody who's experienced the J6 criminal system himself. I think that she should really be leaning into your expertise, because this is all you've done. This is all Trennis has done. And Harmeet is going to need a team, because you're going up against a beast. And DC
she has a copy of this strategy guide, as does Laura Trump, as does Mary Flynn, so many other individuals. We've been sharing this book out, and it is available for free. You can download it on the website. We've not hidden it in any way. We've shared it as openly as possible. So these folks have seen the book. Some of the strategies, some of the things I think even the president talks about more with regards to the conditions that they endured since then. These are things that you'll see there in the strategy guide, and I'm getting more and more suspicious every day, and he's ready.
I'm pretty sure he has. He's a smart man. And if he hasn't, he has somebody he trusts who has, and is giving him the cliff notes of what he needs to do. I expect his pen to be very busy. He'll have a lot of pens lined up on his desk come January 20th, 12:01 p.m.
I just realized you just gave me my Christmas wish. Santa, please bring me a pardon pen. I'll wait till January to get it. So that's
and awesome. You know what, Suzanne, if anything, if I had my say, you'd be standing right there on his right shoulder when he's signing it, and Trennis on his left, and you all are getting to witness and getting your pens. That would be an amazing Christmas gift. So God bless you, Suzanne.
The best Christmas gift at all, and it's going to be a few years, a few months, a few weeks late. But
that's okay. That's okay. You know what?
Seeing these folks get home to their families, seeing those loved ones over and over. But listen, it is so important. If Trump does what we want him to do on day one, on day two, we have over 200 plus individuals who need rides home. They're broke. Some of them don't have a place to go. They need to get back home to their families. There are huge needs. So please support organizations like Trennis's, like Sponsor J6, and like American Patriot Relief, Jaleesa and Mark Middleton's organization. All of these groups, Jenny Cudd is putting together a great ranch out there in Texas. So for homeless J6ers, where there's going to be such need, and we're going to need you guys to stay engaged. Once those pardons happen, it's just the beginning of really helping these people get their lives back. So please stay engaged. Please stay passionate about fixing what the government did wrong. And don't forget these J6ers, even after President Trump does what we know he's going to do and sends them home.
We're just going to keep on keeping on. It's what we do. Suzanne Monk, you are a treasure, a national hero. Thank you so much for everything you've done for America, specifically the J6ers and the community surrounding them.
Well, I'm young. I ain't seen nothing yet, Ann. Let's see what we can do with the next administration.
I love it. I love it. God bless you. Thank you for stopping by. Wow, national treasure right there. That woman is a one-woman wrecking ball to the deep state's plans of trying to subdue all of Americans and put us in fear of our government. The government is supposed to fear us, and she reminds me of that every time I talk to her. Why? Because she wields her pen mightily. It's a much more powerful instrument than any sort of arms or weapons you could take up. She knows the law. She's encapsulated it into her J6 Pardon Project, into her handbook, that it's free to you. If you go to j6pardonproject.com, you can download that book for free. I encourage everybody to get it, share it, put it on your email list, send it around to everybody you know. But this is what we need to start with. We need to start sending that and inundating President Trump and members of Congress, frankly, with that pardon book, because we need them to take action day one. This is what the American people want. And President Trump is an instrument of our wants and our needs. And he's going to do what we want and what we need. So we need to let him know what that is. Appreciate all of you so much, as always, tuning in. I'll be leaving tomorrow morning bright and early for North Carolina. So I'll be back up there. We've got the screening of our show, of our new first movie coming out, Ground Zero, North Carolina, Fighting Globalism to Restore the Republic. And we're going to be looking forward every single day to this man showing up. Have a great afternoon.
Greatness doesn't discriminate. It doesn't see where you're from, what you look like, or who you know. Greatness is for those who work for it, for those who keep moving forward. Greatness is for anyone willing to fight for it.